Alright students, we went over this in class, but I think it'd be nice to have something to fall back on, so I'll briefly go through the production possibilities frontier curve again in case you're having trouble. What the production possibility frontier curve measures is what an economy or society is able to produce given that they fully employ or use rather all of their factors of production, including land, labor, capital, technology and entrepreneurship. So every economy strives to produce something that is very close to, if not on this line. And the y-axis here represents capital goods. And just as an example, we have tons of factory goods here, and while the x-axis represents consumer goods, and here we have a number of farm goods. Quick note about the difference between the two. Consumer goods tend to be those goods that you and I would pick up at a grocery store or any store. They're very tangible. You buy them every day. You pick them up off the shelves. You bring them home. You use them. You eat them. You wear them. Whatever. While the y-axis, capital goods, these are goods that we really take for granted. You wouldn't go out and buy these things. These are oftentimes produced and provided by government means, so they can include a lot of infrastructure, roads, bridges, and even military items. So what we have here is just the idea that, sorry about that, my microphone stopped for some reason. But basically what this slide is telling us is that when we choose to produce more of capital goods, we're going to lose, or when we choose to produce more capital goods, we're going to lose more consumer goods. And the reason for that is because both capital and consumer goods are very specialized. It takes a lot of energy, money, and time to switch from producing one to the other. And so that switching of the production can really result in a number of inefficiencies. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. This right here we're going to just squeeze by for a second. What we're showing here, letter I, is a point where an economy probably is not going to want to be. I represents that we're producing about 300 tons of factory goods or capital goods, and at the same time producing about 20 tons of farm goods per year. What this means is that the factors of production, which hopefully I don't have to go over again here, they're not being fully utilized. What that can mean is that you may have a high unemployment rate, or maybe your physical capital is just not up to par, and your roads and bridges are failing, and you may have a weak military, and you're just not attracting high quality labor to get the jobs done for you. So I is a place where you never want to be, and as you can see over here, this means that all your resources, your factors of production, are not being used efficiently. G would be awesome if we could get there, but we can't. And the reason for that is because this is the frontier curve. You can't pass the frontier curve. You got to push that out, and we'll talk about how we can push that out later. But G means basically this is a very desirable place that you want to be. So the state of Minnesota would probably want to be out there, and we'll talk about how we can go ahead and push this particular line out further so we could achieve that gap. D is obviously where all economies and societies want to be. It means that you're utilizing your factors of production in a much wiser fashion and in a much more efficient fashion as well. As we move along the PPF curve, this just represents or shows that to gain some, we have to give up the other. That's your opportunity cost. So if we move from D to E, we're going to gain 10 tons of consumer goods. But at the same time, we're going to lose our capital goods. It's going to move from 400 tons to 300 tons. And that just represents the opportunity costs and decisions that every society and economy has to make. Here it just shows you basically the same thing, but I want to point out something here. When we moved from D to E, we saw that we lost 100 tons of capital goods and gained 10 tons of consumer goods. Now we move from E to F, we're still gaining 10 tons of consumer goods, which would lead you to believe that we would lose another 100 capital goods, but that's just not the case. In this case, we're losing a lot more. We lose, in fact, progressively more of the other. And that's because the resources that we use to produce goods and services, they're very specialized. And when you move closer to either axis, you're going to lose progressively more of the other. And the example we used in class was the Army example, or the military example, in that if GM is asked by the government to produce a couple of tanks or military items, they just need to tweak a couple things on their assembly line and they can make that happen without moving too far on this curve. But if we were to enter a war and GM or Ford or any of the major car manufacturers were asked to build a lot more military items, then we're going to move up this line and we're going to progressively lose more consumer goods. In this example, we would lose a lot more cars on the roads, but we would gain tanks and other military items that we may need. So here's the dilemma. How can we gain more capital or consumer goods without losing anything? And that's what every economy strives to do. And the way we do that is we take this solid purple production possibilities frontier curve and we push it outward. We push it out to the right. So you can see in this example that if we wanted to gain 20 tons of consumer goods moving from D to H without losing any of our capital goods, we would have to push this out to where it is. And the same can be said for gaining capital goods and not having to lose your 50 tons of consumer goods. This slide just kind of shows exactly what I was just talking about, how you don't have to give up another good to gain more of the good that you want. So really here we don't have an opportunity cost, we're just gaining. So the question then is, how do we increase our PPF curve? Well, there's a number of things that we can do as a society and an economy to make that happen. One of the easiest things, and I guess I shouldn't say easy, but one thing you could do is increase your economy's resources. You can buy up new land, or you could take land from other individuals, and better yet, you could use that land to its fullest extent. So if you have oil reserves that are not being tapped for energy sources, then you could go ahead and do that. You could also increase your population, increase immigration, and hopefully with that you're going to be able to attract bright-minded individuals who may be entrepreneurs and have great ideas and resources themselves, and they could put them to use here in the state of Minnesota or the United States. Another way you could do it is to improve your technology and invest in research and development to create innovations that would allow us to increase our output. A simple example could be the emergence of hydraulic fracturing, which allows us now to extract natural gas from shale rock, which is something that we haven't been able to do years past. So there's another way that we can go ahead and do that. Another thing we can do is invest in our human capital. That would be the skills, the knowledge, the training, and the education that we provide for our citizens, for the people that live here, so that they can then turn around and use their own human capital to come up with ideas and become entrepreneurs and to contribute to society, so that we can push this PPF curve out to the right. A couple of things that you'll see here we'll go through in class, and we'll talk about how Minnesota has attempted to do that, and show you a couple articles on that. We'll show you what Russia has done. There's some pretty extreme measures that the rest of the world has also utilized in order to push this curve outward. This chart is something that we will dive into a little bit more in class, but sorry, my microphone does not want to work properly here. But what this graph is showing us is that if we can get a lot of people, or if we can attract bright-minded foreign workers and students to come to the United States, or in this case Minnesota, we can see that quite a few of them are able to earn advanced degrees. And with those advanced degrees, they can produce new ideas and help to contribute to a growing economy. So now that we are through the production possibility frontier curve, if you have any further questions, make sure that you do speak up in class and ask those questions so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page, or talk to a student that may understand it a little bit more and help each other out. But what we're moving into now is the different types of markets that exist and the type of economic system that the United States uses. And a market basically is just a place where buyers and sellers exchange things. Usually you're buying a product and you're going to give them money, so it's very straightforward. Adam Smith has done a lot of work in this area. Our economy is more or less based on his ideas, and we'll talk more about his contributions in class, but we tend to see him as the founder of the free market and the pure capitalism idea, where if you allow the market to thrive, the economy will thrive or go along with it. So we'll talk a lot more about him and his contributions in class. Just a look at the book he wrote, Wealth of Nations, in 1776. So in a free market society, that's what we're talking about here, basic capitalist principles. There's a few of them that we want to go through. In capitalist societies, goods and services are always exchanged for a profit. So people look to make things or produce things that are in high demand. And that brings us back to our questions that we looked at the beginning of this unit, the questions of, who are your consumers and what are you going to produce and how are you going to do that? So you want to find out, what to answer those questions, and then you can put those answers to use. In capitalism, human labor is always the source of value, and we'll do a couple fun things with this in class, but labor is necessary in any market, and it is especially necessary in capitalism. A little bit about the invisible hand. The invisible hand is kind of interesting. It's the example I'll use is, how much do you think you should pay for a product or a car or whatever if you're shopping? I know a lot of times there's bargain shoppers who know that they're not going to spend $80 on a pair of jeans because they can find a very similar pair of jeans elsewhere. So really, what the invisible hand does is it basically sets price and quantity just through the natural workings of capitalism by having consumers who are aware of the market and what's out there, and producers who are working to produce a product that is of high quality at the lowest price. So competition actually allows for better products, higher quality products, and lower price. And so both the consumer and the producer, or the buyer and the seller, the example here, are able to win just through self-interest on both ends. So the next principle we're going to look at is the law of supply and demand. We'll have a whole unit on this in microeconomics later on this year, and how these forces tend to interact with one another and produce a quantity and a price that is acceptable for both the consumer and the producer. In class, I'll show you a couple little things on what your car is worth and how you know what to set your car's price at if you're trying to sell it, and that basically relates back to supply and demand. And in the capitalist structure, competition is key. And I know this picture's kind of gone over this, and I apologize, but I promise it won't look like that in the class. But basically, in a competitive market system, producers are compelled to always be efficient, and if they're not efficient, then consumers are going to go elsewhere. So they're always striving to be better and to produce the best product possible. In a capitalist society, a social division of labor will always exist. What this means is that whatever you're looking for, whatever you have thought about, if you've thought, gosh, I wonder if there's a service out there for this, or if there's a good for this, chances are it's probably already out there. If you've ever watched Dirty Jobs, it's a television show where this guy goes out and does all the dirty jobs. You know that there are people that are willing to do those jobs because there's a need for it. And so we'll look at some of those jobs here in the near future. Another feature of capitalism is this term laissez-faire. Leave things alone is what it means. And what it refers to is that the government should stay out of the market if at all possible and allow things to take care of themselves, and price and quantity will always follow. So I'm going to stop there and keep this thing under 15 minutes, and I'll send out another PowerPoint with a voiceover here on our next section.